Hello again in this video clip series, my journey to God in a very secularized world. We were talking in the last few video clips on this topic of forbidden to speak about sin. And at the end of the last, should be video clip 117. I had ended talking about that, talking about my struggle against selling of pornography. Had a little experience with this same pastor I was talking about before, that was near me, which I also celebrated a daily mass for him as every day for several years. And at a certain point, after mass, we would go to a bar and get a coffee together. And at a certain point, this bar, they decided to put in public, right outside the bar, in the road, where everybody could see it in the road, a woman totally nude. And I was not very happy with, and I said it to the bar, the owner of the bar and everything else. And he justified it and everything else. And the pastor said very clearly to me, what I did, I began to not go to that bar anymore. And the pastor said I would never do anything like that, because for the priest today, the first priority is to not lose parishioners, not offend anybody, and the first priority is to keep your friends. To not ever say anything. I mean, a good priest, like if you read the lives of the saints, they always tried to help people get to heaven. Now there's no more, the pastors don't care anymore. They just care about keeping their friends. So they don't try to help them to overcome, to live the Ten Commandments. And so anyway, this pastor wasn't very happy with me, and I quit going to that bar because they put pornography right out in the middle of the road. But anyway, maybe in another time we'll go more into depth of that and talk about it a little bit more. Talking about going back again to Amoris Laetitia, this introduction of my Cardinal of Perugia, Bassetti. He said not because we go along with the thinking, and the first thing that we think about is that they are in a state of mortal sin. He's accusing good priests of the first thing you think about, they're in sin. No, that's not the case. The first thing you think about, how can I get these guys to heaven for eternity? But he just looks at it like, if you're trying to get them out of sin, then you're bad. Look at the attitude here, as if heaven is automatic, hell doesn't exist, so you can't talk about sin. You see, incredible here that they're not helping people get to heaven anymore, or to overcome anything so as to get to heaven. And the Cardinal continues, this we do not have the right. In other words, to point out that sin exists and that you could fall in the hill. You don't have a right to talk about that, as all the saints did in the past. And my question is my Cardinal concerned at all about the eternal salvation of souls, or only human respect? Does he believe that hell exists? And has he read the 70 references to hell in the 4 Gospels from the mouth of Christ? And has he studied, as he told the priests to do before opening our mouths, the many explanations in the Catechism of the Catholic Church about the dangers for souls to end up separated from God for all eternity? No! There's a Professor Ralph Martin, in the Seminary of the Sacred Heart, Detroit, Michigan, United States, clarified this very important teaching of the Second Vatican Council in his book, Will Many Be Saved? With the subtitle, What Vatican II Actually Teaches and Its Implication for the New Evangelization. Ralph Martin explains how people hear that it is possible to be saved without hearing the gospel. Then a funny thing happens, he says. They say, I am glad to hear that. I do not have to worry about people anymore. So they jump from the possibility to the presumed probability of almost universal certainty. You see the logic here? The modern church and the sneakiness of the Freemasonry, the strategy of just dismantling our religion. There is always the example, Ralph Martin continues, there's always example, probably people like Hitler, will not make it to heaven. That type of thing. Even the most famous theologians who write on this subject do this, like Casper and others. They just pay attention to the first few sentences of Lumen Gentium 16, and they jump from the possibility to probability, and they completely ignore the last three sentences. They always pick and choose because they're promoting an agenda that's given to them by the Freemasons, that we have to get rid of sin. So everybody's free of God, free of the Ten Commandments, and we're finally free to go to hell. And they jump. And so he says, these last three sentences speak about all those people who theoretically have the possibility of saying yes to the grace of God without hearing the gospel, but do not. And very often the council is telling us that this responding to the grace of God does not happen based on what Scripture reveals to us about the human condition. In other words, normally we fall into sin. It's not like, the human nature, original sin is that. The verse of the Gospel of Mark, he quotes, "He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned." Mark 16 is talking about the outcome of our response to the Lord having consequences. Because today they want to say hell doesn't exist. The teaching of the council is teaching in harmony with sacred Scripture. And the church, and even though it is possible for someone to be saved without hearing the gospel, very often that does not happen. We really need to help people to encounter Jesus Christ and to discover the fullness of the means of sanctification and of the truth of the Catholic Church. You might visit again the article I wrote regarding this, The Hidden Broad Road to Perdition. My cardinal, as so many bishops and priests today in the church, among other things, does not make distinctions. Even though St. Thomas Aquinas wrote, "Rarely affirm, seldom deny, always distinguish." My cardinal does not distinguish between the objective and the subjective. It is clear that only God can judge the subjective things, the invisible things, such as thought, motives, etc. But we must judge the objective things, the visible things. Otherwise, we get led into scandal, as Jesus says, and St. Paul, and the Bible's full of it. We must judge what we can see so as not to follow the wrong path. For example, the reading of the 23rd Sunday, Cycle A, explains this. Okay? The readings. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and as a tax collector. Truly, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Matthew 18. And then another example, very strong, from Ezekiel, from the letter of Ezekiel. "So you, son of man, I have made a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. If I say to the wicked, O wicked man, you shall surely die, and you do not speak to warn the wicked to turn from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. But if you warn the wicked to turn from his way, and he does not turn from his way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you shall save your life." This is Ezekiel 33. This is exactly in contrast with what my cardinal and Pope Francis is saying, the modern church and the Freemasonry. God is saying to Ezekiel, you have to tell the people, change your ways. Otherwise, Ezekiel will end up, Jesus says, he says, if you don't admonish the sinner, God is saying, but his blood I will require at your hand. Priests and bishops who do not admonish sinners, as my bishop and Pope Francis is saying, God will require the blood of that person from the priests and bishops who were silent. That was always the teaching until recently in the modern church in the last 10 years. To read about many theologians, maybe we could, to read about many theologians very worried about the effects of Mores Laetitia, you might visit my article that's called, Is the Pope Catholic? The Greatest Schism in Catholic Church History. May God bless you and Mother Mary guide you.